My relationship with Stevie is fragmented.
Yeah.
I think there's still a lot of love there, but you have to begin with the fact that in order to get through those early days, it was kind of an exercise in compartmentalization for everyone emotionally.
Stevie Nicks made the move to patch things with Lindsey Buckingham, but ended things without saying a word instead. For 50 years, the world thought it knew their story, but most of it was wrong. What did he do that night that crossed a line she had never drawn? And why did she say she simply couldn't stand it anymore? Join us as we find out what Stevie Nicks has to say about Lindsey. Invitation to Greatness. The story starts at a church social in Atherton, California in 1966. A 16-year-old named Lindsey Buckingham sat down at the piano and played a Mamas and the Papas song. A 17-year-old named Stevie Nicks walked over and joined in on the harmonies. They locked eyes. She later said she thought he was a darling. They did not get together that night. For the next few years, they were bandmates in a group called Fritz, playing venues across California while both studied at San Jose State University. Fritz landed opening slots for major acts, Hendrix, Joplin, and Cream, but a record deal never came. A producer named Keith Olsen eventually delivered the news they already felt. Fritz was never going to make it, but the two of them had something worth pursuing on their own. Leaving the band was what finally pushed them together. Suddenly, it was just the two of them building something from nothing. They moved in together and took whatever work they could find. Nicks waited tables. Buckingham played sessions. They fell in love in the middle of making their first album. That album, Buckingham Nicks, released in 1973, flopped almost everywhere. The cover attracted attention. Both photographed nude, staring into the camera. But the music barely registered at radio. The one exception was Birmingham, Alabama, where local DJs played it constantly and built them a devoted following. One city. Everywhere else, nothing. Polydor dropped them. They were back at square one. Then Mick Fleetwood heard it. Fleetwood Mac had been losing members for years. Founding guitarist Peter Green had left. Others had followed. Fleetwood was in a Los Angeles studio searching for a new guitarist when an engineer put the Buckingham Nicks record on. A few weeks later, he tracked Buckingham down and offered him a spot without ever watching him play a note live. Buckingham's answer came the same day. He would join, but only if she came too. Fleetwood had not thought much about Nicks when he made the offer. Within days of being on the road together, he understood. You did not get one without the other. The 1975 Fleetwood Mac album, the first with both of them, reached #1 in the United States. The songs Nicks brought became instant audience favorites. Buckingham produced and arranged everything she wrote. She arrived with the emotional core, the melody, the concept, and the feeling, and he rebuilt it into something much larger. She gave him that credit openly and consistently. Without him, she said, the songs would not have been what they became. But the moment the outside world began responding to her name differently from his, something shifted in him. He was proud of what he was building. He was also watching the world take it and hand it almost entirely to her. Journalists wrote about her. Audiences screamed for her. Radio played her songs first. The admiration and the resentment were growing in the same direction from the very beginning, and neither of them had the words for it yet. He wanted her close, but the closer she was, the harder it got. By the time that first album finished its run in the charts, the relationship they had built from nothing was already fracturing. And the record that was about to make them famous was the one they were going to write about it. So what does it look like when two people who genuinely cannot function without each other sit down to write an entire album about everything that is already going wrong between them? Writing heartbreak in real time. Rumors was recorded in 1976, and the conditions inside those sessions were unlike anything the band had experienced before. Two couples were falling apart at the same time. Nicks and Buckingham had split. John and Christine McVie's marriage was ending. Everyone was recording songs about people sitting in the very next room. The recording engineer later described the atmosphere as running on heartbreak, rage, and cocaine. Nicks said she began using just to get through the sessions. That habit took years to break. There were no filters on what those songs were about, and Nicks had no interest in softening them. The world would hear it, know exactly who it was about, and she was completely comfortable with that. Every song she wrote for that album came directly from what was happening in that building, in those relationships, in real time. Her contribution, Dreams, was almost calm compared to everything surrounding it. It was a song about someone trying to stay hopeful as a relationship ends, acknowledging the pain while leaving room for both people to come through it okay. She later said she wrote it, genuinely believing they would both get through everything and be fine. His contribution, Go Your Own Way, was an entirely different kind of song. It was direct, pointed, and accusatory. One specific lyric in that song implied that she had been unfaithful, something she considered to be completely and entirely untrue. She was furious. He knew she was furious. He understood exactly how that lyric landed on her. He left it in the song anyway. For him, blunt honesty was the whole point. And then the album came out and went to #1. Then came the tour. Night after night, in arena after arena, Buckingham stood on stage and sang that lyric with Nicks standing nearby. She said years later that every single time he performed that song with her in the room, she had wanted to physically confront him. He was not singing it out of habit or obligation. He knew exactly what he was doing. He understood exactly what that accusation meant to her, how long she had spent denying it, how much it had cost her. He sang it anyway, every night, on purpose. That, she later said, was his way of making her pay for leaving. And for years, she paid it. But the war between them was not limited to lyrics. Buckingham said in 1977 that he had been genuinely terrified of being alone when the relationship ended. He said the band structure made it almost impossible to maintain any relationship outside of it. He was surprised, he admitted, that the two of them had lasted as long as they had. By 1982, some of the sharpest edges had softened. Nicks said publicly that regardless of everything, they would always love each other. They argued constantly, she said, but the feeling underneath had never completely gone away. The Rumors album eventually sold over 40 million copies worldwide. It remains one of the best-selling albums in history. The two people most responsible for it could barely be in the same room. And the further the record climbed, the harder it became for either of them to separate their professional lives from the wreckage of their personal one. By the time the decade turned, Nicks had built a solo career that was beginning to seriously threaten to overshadow the band itself, and Buckingham had noticed. What happened when the business machinery caught up to what was already broken between them, and who finally ran out of patience first? The decade they couldn't survive. Through the early 1980s, Nicks built a solo career alongside the band. Her 1981 debut, Belladonna, was a commercial success. She released further albums and found an audience that was distinctly her own. She was being promoted as a star independently of Fleetwood Mac, and that shift did not go unnoticed inside the band. In 1985, she checked into the Betty Ford Center for Cocaine Addiction. She came out clean. Then she was prescribed a tranquilizer called Klonopin to help manage the withdrawal symptoms. That medication created a dependency that was far harder to identify than the cocaine had been. It was not dramatic in the way the cocaine had been. It was slow and quiet. She became harder to reach, less present, less able to fight for herself. She later said that the years she spent on Klonopin, roughly 1985 to 1993, represented a period of her life she could barely account for. She was there and not there at the same time. By the time the band was deep into recording Tango in the Night in 1987, she was frequently absent from sessions altogether. When the album was finished and the full band gathered at Christine McVie's house to plan the upcoming world tour, Buckingham announced he was not going. Nicks stood up, crossed the room, and tried to strangle him. He ran, and she followed him outside. What happened in that driveway was the most physically violent moment of their lives together, and when it was over, he was done with Fleetwood Mac. He left. The band continued the world tour without him. Nicks did not stay much longer. The band's management refused to allow her to include Silver Springs, a song she had written directly about Buckingham, on a personal box set she was putting together. That refusal was the line she would not cross. She walked away shortly after. In 1990, with both of them out of the band and speaking publicly for the first time in years, Nicks was more direct than she had ever been. The comparison people remember from that period is the boa constrictor and the rat. She said he had always wanted her for himself, but when she was there, he was cold and suspicious. He questioned where she had been. He did not trust her. Over time, she had become smaller around him. Her laughter irritated him. Her confidence irritated him. The way she handled difficult situations irritated him. She had spent years shrinking herself to keep the peace. That ended in 1987. By 1992, Buckingham had a different explanation for what had gone wrong. The real problem, he said, had started the moment Nicks was singled out and promoted as the primary star. Once that happened, the business machinery took over. 5 separate sets of managers and lawyers surrounded the band members. A straightforward conversation became nearly impossible. What had once been a genuine creative partnership had turned into something else entirely, and watching it happen had broken his heart. By 1993 and 1994, Nicks told interviewers that Buckingham believed she had robbed him of something fundamental, and that in his mind, she deserved serious punishment for it. When he got genuinely angry, she said, it was deeply frightening. The last time they had spoken, as of 1994, was at a Clinton inauguration event. After that, 3 years of complete silence passed between them, and then they were back on the same stage every single night. But was anything they were performing for each other actually real? The equilibrium that couldn't hold. The 1997 Fleetwood Mac reunion tour was built around the 20th anniversary of Rumors, and every night it had a moment that stopped audiences cold. Nicks performed Silver Springs with him on guitar beside her. For the full length of the song, she stared directly at him and did not look away. At the end, she rested her head against his back. Backstage, nothing had changed romantically, and neither of them pretended otherwise. When a journalist asked Buckingham that year whether a personal reunion was possible, he left the door slightly open. "Not yet," he said, "but who knew?" Nicks was asked the same question and gave an entirely different answer. She said over her dead body, if the choice was between a love affair and living entirely on her own terms, she was choosing her own terms every single time. She also described in 1997 what their years of living together had actually looked like. From 1971 to 1975, she said, they had been married in everything except paperwork. She cooked, cleaned, worked, and took care of him. What audiences watching that tour did not know was that she had only recently come through the Klonopin dependency that had dismantled her throughout the late 1980s and well into the early 1990s. She later said those years had cost her something she never fully got back. By the time she and Buckingham were back on stage together in 1997, she was only beginning to feel like herself again. By 1998, something had genuinely shifted between them. Nicks said publicly that they were probably better friends than they had been in years. Real conversations had happened between them. That same year, the full band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 2003, they recorded one final album together, the last music Fleetwood Mac would ever make as a complete lineup. By 2009, Nicks described the clear difference between her two professional lives plainly. Inside Fleetwood Mac, there was always tension. In her solo career, she felt free. By 2015, she acknowledged that the piece had clear limits. They still knew exactly how to hurt each other, and probably always would. For years, they had quietly joked about one day ending up together in a retirement home, both of them knowing it was never going to happen. That chapter closed at an airport when Buckingham's first child was on the way. She said out loud what both of them already understood. That version of things was over, and he agreed. So when she walked into that room in January 2018, still carrying a song she hoped they could perform together, what exactly did he do that made her decide once and for all that she was done? The night she decided, and everything after. In January 2018, Fleetwood Mac was being honored at the MusiCares benefit in New York. Nicks arrived with a song she had recorded called Borrowed. She wanted Buckingham to hear it. She thought it was something they could perform together. She walked in, still looking for a way forward. What happened inside made that impossible. The band was introduced with Rhiannon, her song, the one most tied to her identity, the Welsh witch character that had defined her stage presence for decades. Buckingham's reaction was visible to everyone. He showed his displeasure openly, in front of the cameras, in front of the crowd. When Nicks gave a long speech on behalf of the whole group, he sat behind her and smirked through parts of it. Harry Styles, who had a close friendship with Nicks, was also on the receiving end of his deliberate coldness. Nicks did not react. She let the evening play out. At some point during that ceremony, something settled inside her. She said afterward she heard her mother's voice asking whether she really wanted to spend the next 15 years in this. She heard her father's voice, a practical man who had always genuinely liked Buckingham, telling her it was time to call it what it was, a divorce. Between those two voices, the decision was made. She was done. Buckingham was removed from the band and replaced by Neil Finn and Mike Campbell. Nicks said she wanted the next 10 years to feel light. Buckingham said what broke his heart was not the missed tour, but the way it ended. 43 years of always finding a way through, and it ended like this. In 2019, Buckingham suffered a heart attack requiring open-heart surgery. He recovered fully. By 2021, he was talking. He said Nicks had wanted to reshape the band around her own vision. He made a pointed public comment about her choice not to have children. She responded, her choices were hers, not his, to judge. On who fired whom, she rejected his version entirely. She fired herself. Christine McVie died in November 2022. Nicks said Fleetwood Mac died with her, and she meant it literally. Christine had been the emotional center of that band for decades. She was the one who made it possible for Nicks and Buckingham to keep showing up to the same room. Without her, nothing was holding any of it together. At a memorial gathering in Los Angeles shortly after, Nicks and Buckingham found themselves face to face for the first time since MusiCares. They spoke for 3 minutes. She said afterward she had given him more chances than anyone could count. When a journalist noted she had become a far larger cultural figure than he, she did not argue. That, she said, had been one of the core problems all along. In 2023, Buckingham said in a published interview that he was still writing songs about her and was ready to return if she ever changed her position. In 2024, the Buckingham Nicks album, out of print for nearly 50 years, was made available to stream. Both posted about it separately. Then both appeared on a podcast discussing a song from that album recorded apart but released together. Nicks revealed she had spoken with Buckingham the night before recording her segment. He said she had always given him the emotional core to work from, and that without it, he would have had nothing to build on. 50 years later, that was still entirely true. Whether anything else was, that part remained open. Stevie said she gave him more than 300 million chances, so at what point, if ever, do you think she should have walked away for good? Was what Lindsey did to Stevie over 50 years deliberate cruelty, or were they just two people who genuinely could not stop hurting each other, no matter how hard they tried? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.